Let's do it. All right, everybody. Jared James here. Welcome to this episode of Today with Jared James. I am especially thrilled because I get a chance today to talk to someone that I've known in different ways for years now, whether it's through the conferences or just running into each other or just kind of talking on the phone. Our thoughts back and forth about all of the roller coaster of things that have been going on in the industry and getting each other's thoughts. And so, with that being said, I am joined today by Rick Haase, the president of United Real Estate. You want to say hello to everybody, Rick?
Hey, everybody. Glad you're here. Glad to be here.
You wear multiple hats. You were just telling me. So it's president of United Real Estate, but then you want to tell everybody you're wearing
Yeah,
multiple
the
hats.
other the other hat is Chief Operating Officer of our holding company, United Real Estate Group, Jared.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's the growth engine for our company has been on the United Real Estate side. We
yeah.
we went from 139th, 154th, 154, 139, all the way up to six. And based on year in and year out changes in the industry, we could be seventh, eighth, ninth, whatever. But
Say that again. So you went from what do you mean as far as like
oh,
agent count, as
yeah,
far as volume, or what do you mean? Like you
yeah.
guys went from 154 in what?
National rank, 154th largest by transaction count and agent count. And then we moved all the way up over the last 5 years
That's
to,
all that's all in the last 5 years.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
impressive, man. And that's actually we're going to get into some of that today. And it's
Mhm.
it's so funny because I see I've worked with you guys for years and I see the headlines a lot of times and I'm like, "Oh, they're doing it again. Oh,
Yeah,
they're merging. Oh, look at that. Another company they're taking over." And I'm like, and I love it. Like I think it's fantastic and I think that it's especially at a time like right now, my belief is that there's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions and these kinds of things. And so I love it when I see good people kind of taking over these
yeah,
companies and just growing, at a time when I don't think that's what people think about real estate companies right now is them growing. And so we're going to get into all that. I think that's awesome. But you guys had moved from 154th up to, what'd you say, number six?
up to number six. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. In that short a period of time too, honestly, sometimes I stand back and say, oh my, how do we do it? Then
Yeah.
I look in the mirror and see the wrinkles and
Wow.
go, yeah, I know how we
You
did
might just be looking at the Zoom right now and looking at me, but
it.
uh
Exactly.
now do
You
you
know
guys when
that
you guys we again we're gonna get into all this, but like this is where my head works. Tell everybody United Real Estate, like, do you guys have a set model? Are you guys a 100% model? Are you a traditional model? Are you I know the answers to these questions, but like I'm
yeah,
gonna ask it just
do.
for everybody listening. What is your model?
Okay, so it takes a little bit of understanding. First things first, we have a very rare assemblage of talent that whether it's capital markets or understanding how to create enterprise value or accounting services and finance services that are incredible or marketing, we have just brought together some really high level thought leaders and accomplished people to be able to do what we did. And we joke about it's just hard work. No, it's hard work, but it's fun work too. And
Right.
we have the talent in the company to do it. As far as our model goes, we're running what we call a house of brands, not a branded house. Jared, I know you know that, but whether it's Platinum in St. Louis, Kansas City, or it's virtual properties, 5,000 agents in Atlanta for us, 5,200 agents in Atlanta, or it's the magnificent Philip Cantrell's company, Benchmark,
Yeah. Love
in
love
Greater
Philip. Yeah. I
Nashville.
was just with them.
Yeah, I know. He's just an amazing guy.
Good people.
But Steve Wagner and I can go right around the country, go up to DC, the tri-state area up there, and we've got Eric Pearson, who's driving a lot of our lead acquisition, distribution, and conversion processes. Philip on focused 100% on strategy. Steve Wagner on our learning academy. We've done all that. We run a house of brands, and as far as the model goes, they're all somewhat derivations of
Gotcha.
this. That our mission is to improve the financial trajectory of our agents and brokers' careers and lives. So I've been in companies where missions were things you hung on the wall, and if I walked in and stood in front of them, the person I was asking what's our mission couldn't tell us.
Yeah, right.
But we are incredibly focused on operationalizing that mission of improving the financial trajectory of our agents, brokers, careers, and lives. And we make decisions through that. So it's totally operationalized mission, which is a very rare thing indeed for companies to be able to say that. But
Yeah.
by being focused on that, agents, everybody goes, "Hey, you guys are focused on being big," and we're really not. That's not part of our mission. Now, what happens? We're focused on being good, and then we're handsomely rewarded by growth.
Yeah.
And I know that I sound like a textbook right now, but it's not textbook. It is what needs to happen in order to have this kind of growth.
Yeah, I've seen you just kind of like jet setting all over the place. You may be talking about the wrinkles and the years, but you're still hustling right now. Like, I mean, you're
Oh
still
man.
jumping around. I see different things with you in front of different groups and talking to different leaders and creating different mergers and creating different acquisitions and creating different like you're in hustle mode, it looks like. You guys have been really cool. It's been really cool for me to see just because like I said, I've worked with you guys for so many years, and so to see the growth and to also know like what people are coming into has always been gratifying for me to see, just because I've always enjoyed the network, the people who I've gotten to know, even before it's grown like it has. It's one of the reasons why, and we'll get into this, I'm looking forward to the conference coming up because I know there's been so much growth. So that's an awesome thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that conference ends up to be super important. We can talk about that later. But yeah, so rare assemblage of talent, focused on mission, and the mission's right. We've got a 5-point plan to be able to make that financial trajectory inflect upwards for brokers and agents, and we're working it. We're working it hard. It's what gets us out of bed every morning.
That's awesome. All right, so tell me about you though. So I know you. A lot of people know you. A lot of people won't know you as well. And so, were you always in real estate? Like,
Yeah,
how long
yeah.
have you been in real estate? Like, when did you get in real estate? What got you into real estate? Like, what happened? Were you born in an open house? Like, what happened here? Like, how did you get here?
No, I'll tell you, I was born in a wonderful house filled with love, but it wasn't real estate related. Um, as a matter of fact, that's a great question, Jared. I was in the back seat of my girlfriend's car being chaperoned on a double date with her mom and her mom's boyfriend.
I got to tell you, I was wondering where that was going. I,
I
I was
know.
like, we're a family program here, Rick. This
Yeah,
is
yeah, I
yeah.
know. But no, this is a true story, man. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about it, but
No, I love it.
we were on our way. We were on our way to dinner, and there I heard a conversation between mom and the gentleman she was dating for years and years and years. He was a real estate broker, and I
Mhm.
heard him kind of whisper to my girlfriend's mom how much money he made in that month, just that month.
Oh
And
wow.
it was significantly more. And I'm 18, I'm 17 years old, and it was significantly more than my dad made in a year.
Jeez.
And because I wasn't born into a family that could afford to send us off to a 4-year college, Ivy League, or even because I needed to find a path, that sounded like a good path. And I asked him if he'd sponsor me. Started the school, got licensed when I was 18 years old in 3 days. And that was over 3 decades ago.
So
So
wait, it took you 3 days to get your license?
no, I was 17 back when that conversation triggered
Gotcha.
the interest and the motivation. But I got licensed at a very young age. You had to be 18 years old to get licensed
Yeah.
in Ohio, probably every state. But I turned 18, passed my test, and was off and running as a salesperson. And that kind of ties to what you do. I had the benefit of having what I would call a master salesperson teach
Hmm.
me. And his name was Jim Maroka. He was in Lake County, Ohio.
Wow.
And I didn't fully appreciate it then, but all the stuff he made me do as an 18-year-old real estate agent
Huh.
was responsible for, like the career move that I did. And within a couple of years, I was making more money than I ever thought possible or knew existed. And the only reason I talk about money in that is because I think a lot of a lot of agents today get into the business and they don't have the benefit of that mentoring and that coaching. The work that ties to the work that you're doing too, because even though you're not in there in there every single day. My experience of what you deliver is you deliver actionable
Right.
items that people can, not just get a shot in the arm of motivation
That's
or
right.
inspiration, but they have a track to run on when we're done.
That's right. And that's the key thing, man. Like that's I always get annoyed. I'll joke around sometimes, and I'll say like, look, if you're looking for someone to get up and say think big and then think bigger, like you hired the wrong person. Like that's just at the end of the day, like you got to actually do something. Like
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, do you remember any of the things that mentor had you doing?
Oh,
On a daily basis? Like, was it, old school phone book calling? Was it like, what was he having you do?
well, you can imagine how many people are lining up to list their house with an 18-year-old. It doesn't happen. So,
Hey, I
and
got
this,
a son. I got a son who wants to go get his license right now. I'm gonna not let him hear that part. Okay.
yeah, well, here's the thing though. It turns out my mentor, Jim, was right. People love to work with young people who are assertively going after the business.
Yeah.
So as long as you don't fake it, as long as you have a resource for getting good information and good training, that youth is a wonderful thing. People love to
Right.
work with you. But
Yeah.
yeah, I did. I had to prove myself if I was going to be able to be licensed by him, or supported at the broker role by him. I had to make sure that I was prospecting every day, and every single day of those early days, I had to talk to over 100 people. It was 100 people a day was my number.
Yeah.
And people, when you say that today, it's like, how do you talk to 100 people? Well, it's cold calling. I use traditional neighbors to the listing. If
Yeah.
our company had a listing in the marketplace, if our company had a listing in the marketplace, I was calling around the neighborhood to tell them
Good old circle prospecting
the
around that
circle
property.
prospecting, what we listed it for, if there was a price adjustment, whether there was an open house, if it went pending, I called. If it went
Yeah.
to a closing, I called. And it was just, they're the easiest calls in the world to make because you're offering information about the neighborhood. And I had to do that
That's
100
right.
times a day. I used something called a cross reference, which was literally just a reverse lookup. And I had to call around that listing 100 a day. But I had a manager that was at the door when I was trying to leave. And he made sure that he looked. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but he looked at everything I did and
Yeah.
said, did I really talk to 100 people?
That doesn't
When
sound
they
crazy,
do,
by the way. That doesn't sound crazy at all. Like that honestly, I think there's a lot of agents that could still benefit from that.
yeah. He actually, his philosophy was you can't postpone prospecting Monday through Thursday and catch up on Friday. You
Right.
have to develop your people skills and your conversational skills and your ability to interact every single day. And if I honed my skills that way, it would be an accelerant to being able to win business. And he was, spot on correct.
So
Uh,
good. So
by
good.
In a very short order, I could call 100 people and pull 2 or 3 transactions out of that, either by asking them about their interest, who do
Yeah.
they know, relatives. Yeah, so that prospecting was the kind of these. I guess it wasn't slow burning, but it was rocket fuel to my career.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's like what we always look for all these new things, and it's like every conference has 90 apps in 90 minutes, which I really just want to rename to something like where you will not learn one thing. But it's funny how like all of the stuff that has always worked, you can rebrand it, you can put a new name on it, but it still works. It's like I had it falls right in line, by the way. Like I tell people all the time, and I don't know if I'll be talking about this at your guys' conference or not, but like I tell people the goal is not closings, the goal is conversations, because closings are not controllable. Like you can't make it happen right now unless you're going to buy something, but you can control the number of conversations you have. And you said something that was so crucial that I love. And you said that because you were calling about their neighbor's, property, like, the information to give them, they didn't mind you were calling them. They're like, they want to know.
No,
Like, we sit here and we talk about nosy neighbors and all this kind of stuff. And like, if that's true, well, then they want information. They want to know what's happening. They want to know. And it's so funny because, I have, like I said, I have an older son right now who just turned 18. He's going to get his license. And last year, over the summer, he interned for a friend of mine's team who runs the number one team in our state. And his job at that was as an ISA. And he was making 200 to 300 calls a day.
yeah,
And it's so funny because we were literally last night, we were at dinner with a buddy of mine who owns a tech company in our space. And he was kind of asking him like, how'd you do that? Like, how'd you feel? How'd you whatever? And my son was telling him, he's like, look, I knew I wasn't going to be as good as those people that were in that room that were trained. They were older. They sounded older. They had been doing this for years. They had been whatever. He goes, but my advantage was in quantity. He's like, I could out call them. And he's like,
Yeah,
I'm so competitive that like at the end of the day, all our bosses cared about, anybody cared about was how many appointments did you set? That was it. And so they would go in there and they'd occasionally make a call and they'd wait and they'd do this and whatever. And he was just next, 200 to 300 calls a day. And he'd set the most appointments as a 17-year-old kid.
yeah,
And it's like you try to get people in our industry now to understand that at the end of the day, it's still contacts, it's still conversations. And that same truth you said, that when you're circle prospecting, you're talking about their neighbor's property. They want to know it. That's all potential for the type of prospecting you can be doing. What I saw, I've always believed it and I've always taught it, but what I saw firsthand this last summer is like we can get all the new stuff in the world. We can get all the new technology. We can get bigger TVs. We can get AI. We can get all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, contact with potential customers still works. Like
right.
conversations work, prospecting works. Like it's
Yeah.
the controllable.
Well, it is. Look, the market from peak to trough is off somewhere around 40% in terms of existing home sales in America. We have 25,000 agents in 43 states now. So we have to pay close attention to what's going on in the macro trends. And then here's the magic. And I've been through bubble,
I remember
.com
that.
bubble
Yeah.
burst, housing bubble burst, 18% mortgage interest rates, hurricanes, Katrina, when 300 plus of our agents lost their house and everything in it, and the
Jeez.
housing stock was destroyed. Um, Hundreds of thousands of homes in the region were wiped out. If you're paying attention to the California fires today, you
Yeah.
know what a tragedy that is. And there's something like 9,000 homes destroyed. Think about 200 to 300,000 homes out of that market.
Yeah.
Here's the point. I've never seen a market, no matter what the cause or conditions, that didn't have as much business as is necessary
Right.
for our agents to have their best year ever and for our company to have our best year ever.
Yeah.
And so, I'm preaching that lesson across the country, just like my broker said. Jim said to me, you can navigate any market. You don't have to be a victim of what happens. You can do whatever you want because you have that controllable component
Yeah.
called how many people can you talk to and tell the message to?
That's
And
it.
and he was so right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And well, look, all this technology and all this great stuff going on, the different tactics, but the tactics today are only supporting the fundamentals that have remained constant. So
That's it.
in our
Yeah.
company, we call it weapons fire rate, Jared. So our weapons fire rate has to be better than our competition. And if that happens, our agents will have the best years ever. They'll hit their goals. They have their personal bests, and our company will grow. And that's again, it starts with the agent.
Yeah.
So
That's it. I love it. I love it. My message to agents the last year has just been like, look, there's no such thing as a good market or a bad market. There's just the market you're in and what you do with it. Like at
that's
the end
right.
of the day, none of us are in this business because, we want to have a certain increase every year that's guaranteed. And we want to be told, like, we want to have control over what we do, good, bad, or indifferent. But if you're going to have that mentality and say that you want to have control over it, then you got to go out and do something to have control over it. Otherwise you are having control over it and you're not doing well this year and you
And you're not,
controlled
and
that,
you're
you know?
and you're going backwards, right?
That's
Exactly.
exactly it. I loved what you said earlier too. It's so true. Like when you talked about being in the backseat of that car and then hearing them talk and hearing about, what he had made in a year. I remember it's a little different, but like I remember vividly when I went into real estate, I grew up in a household where, single parent household, not a lot of money, not a lot of whatever. And I remember the first time that I personally made six figures in a month. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't think my mom's made six figures like in the last 5 years combined. Like this is, whatever. But it
Right.
was this fundamental shift for me because real estate's a funny thing where it's like there's no turnoff, meaning like once you get to a certain point, nobody comes up, the broker doesn't come up to you and go, "Hey, slow down. People are starting to talk. Like you need to, no need to list anymore, no need to sell anymore. Like you're good, whatever." And I remember just having this thought because it wasn't a crazy month. It was crazy for me with the income coming in, but I remember thinking like, "Oh, I know how I did that." And I was like, "Oh, if I can do that, I can do that again." And there was this crazy thing that happened in my head where like I went from this mentality, almost like a scarcity mindset my whole life, where it was just like, if I could just pay the bills, if I could just pay the bills, if I could just stay out of debt, if I could just, whatever, to all of a sudden I saw this different example where I was like, oh my God, like there's a different level. Like there is and it changed everything for me. Like literally, like my mentality from that point on was different. I was like, the potential is the ceiling went higher. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great that's a great metaphor for life in general is how, are you exposing yourself to those things that'll inspire you to reach higher?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is you have to have, and there's no shortcutting this, and I think sometimes we patty cake around this a little bit. You have to have the discipline to do it. And in the beginning, you have to have the discipline to do those things. They're going to get you those results before they show up.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to have the resources. Like I sold in my first full-time month, I sold 5 houses.
Wow.
Okay. So that happened not because I knew what I was doing, because I knew nothing, but I was able to call on the experienced agents in my office who went with me. There's a guy named Greg Bolefeld that I had at our convention 4 years ago because he was kind of like my running buddy. And if I needed help, I'd call him and he'd come out and help me list, help me close a transaction.
Yeah.
As long as you have that those kind of resources. And like I said, I had Jim, and that made all the difference.
But you were going to
By the
learn
way,
through, you were going to learn through those. You said like, I wasn't even sure what I was doing. It's so funny. My son said that last night. He was like, half the time I'd be on these calls and the ways I learned is because they asked me things and said things that I hadn't anticipated and I didn't know what to say. And he's like, all I knew is that next time somebody said that, I knew what to say. But I
yeah,
had to put myself in positions where I was comfortable enough to understand that I'm probably not going to look great right now. I'm probably not going to, but from that experience, now I've got something I can bring to my boss, I can bring to me, I can bring to whatever and be like, how do I answer that? Like, what do I say here? And now little by little, you're eliminating all those potential things that create the uncertainty that make people not want to make calls to begin with.
yeah. And it's a really interesting thing as different real estate models have evolved. Back in those days, I was making a commission split of 50-50 and glad to have half the money.
Yeah.
As the business matured and evolved, a lot of different models have come out, and those models, in some cases, they've gone too far. When you have a virtual office and you don't have a broker that you can lean on, when I say lean on, at 18 years old, I had to go on my first 21 listing presentations with my broker, and the rule was I had to queue it up for a listing presentation. He'd go with me. He'd win the listing for me, and all I had to do was listen and really soak it in. And literally, I couldn't talk in the meetings. An 18
That
years
was
old,
that was the rule. No, just shut it.
yeah,
Yeah.
true story. I remember
Yeah.
somebody asked me a question because they were obviously a little bit uncomfortable that Jim was answering all the questions, and I got asked a question. They looked right at me and said, "Rick, what do you think about thus and such?" And I gave an answer. We're in the car 10 seconds. And he says, "I told you, you don't talk in these meetings." Now, again, at 18 years old, that works. He's the boss. You're listening
Yeah.
and learning. And I said, "Well, Jim, what do you want me to do?" They asked me a question. He said, "I want you to turn your head slightly, look at me and say, 'Well, Jim, what do you think?' And put the question back to me." So it was that tightly controlled.
They even
So
taught you how to not talk.
he did. Yeah, he was amazing. But man, the stuff I learned.
That's it,
So
man.
when models have entered this space, Jared, and they've gone so far as to not provide, that's extreme. I get it. Um, but when models don't have those kinds of supports in place, like in our
Yeah.
company, all of our companies, we have 135 brokers, owners, and operators, and we have physical plants. Our agents know they can lean on a broker or manager in our system to go out on a listing presentation with them and help them win it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come I think the total virtual model, and you can go online and hold hands with a avatar walking through university. Those are great. It's all cool. I get it, but you need somebody that can guide and direct you when you need it the most, wherever that is. And sometimes that's a real human.
Hey everyone, I want to take a moment and talk to you about a really cool company called Privy. You know, if you were listening to this episode or even moving forward here, you're going to notice that I'm going to talk a lot about investors and how I think this is a huge part of the market that if you're growing a real estate business, we're not paying enough attention to. You know, I'm a big believer here that sometimes to grow your business, you don't just have to pick up a piece of the pie that's already there. Sometimes you have to go to a completely different pie. And it's so interesting because when you look at it, you look at all the data and you see that, 26, 27%, almost 30% of all residential transactions in the last 12 months were investors, right? They were investors. And when I was an agent, like a ton of the business that I did were investors. And so a lot of you hear that and you're like, oh, it's institutional investors. Institutional investors only make up about less than 3% of the overall market. And that's actually going down for the first time in years, which means that we have this huge number of people who are buying and selling properties all of the time, right under our nose, thousands of transactions. They're going to happen regardless. The only question is, are they happening with you? And that's the key thing that I want you to understand. And so when you look at Privy and what they do, they make you the go-to person to work with when it comes to finding investments, when it comes to finding out what a good deal is, when it comes to finding out what the right neighborhoods are, what the wrong neighborhoods are, what previous people had did, all at the touch of a button, right? And so all of a sudden, it's funny, I look at their stuff and I'm like, I worked with all these investors when I was selling real estate, and I'm like, how did I do this without this kind of a tool? And you don't have to do that. Now these kinds of tools are there. And so you're going to hear me in the future talking a lot about working with investors and what that looks like. And like I've said over and over again, it is my job to not only tell you what the problems are and what the solutions are, but ultimately to give you the tools that you need so that you can be the go-to source for something like that. And man, are these people worth a lot of money to you. So do yourself a favor, guys. Go to privy.pro. That's privy.pro. Amazing tool. You can ask us questions. There's more things even coming down the road with them that are just going to blow you away. But this is a tool you need in your business, especially for what it costs. It's not a cost, though. It's an investment, but it's well worth it. Let's start getting those investors. Well, how did you now? I want to get back to this real quick. So you started in real estate. You're selling real estate. How do you get here? Like, when did you start? When did you make the move into being on the executive side? Like, hey, I'm going to start. Were you like that somewhere else? Did that happen at United? Was it called something else and then was moved over to this? Like, what did that look like? How'd you get here?
It's a very natural progression. You know the drill. Most managers of real estate brokerages get their job because they know how to list and sell. Well, after a while, I was asking myself the question: How am I going to make a difference? And I've done a lot of personal missioning work through Gestalt and also through becoming certified to teach what matters most, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Going through my own personal work, I was asking myself a question that I couldn't answer, which is, how am I going to make a difference in the world?
Yeah.
And am I going to sell 20 more houses a year? Am I going to sell 30 more houses a year? Is that really going to float my boat? And once I had that at a level where I was selling enough houses, I had to do something differently, and that led me into meeting other people. I moved for 10 years. I worked for Bill Ravis in Connecticut.
Oh yeah, I know them well. Yeah.
Yeah, did some great stuff there. And then I had a son that was born with special needs, and my daughter was there, but we moved back from Connecticut to Ohio. Worked for Vince and Joe Aveni, another incredible firm called Realty One, not the Realty One.
Oh yeah, yep, I know you do. Yeah.
And then I got recruited to come down south and start helping another company. Had been through a merger, and the merger wasn't going well. And he asked if I could help Rick come down and stitch it together and make it work. And so between that and my organizational behavior studies at Gestalt, was able to be. I have this weird combination of understanding how to intervene in organizations, and I have a deep knowledge of the real estate brokerage and agent business. So that's kind of a unique combination.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't know that. Now I'm curious, and you can, if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to. But you mentioned that you had a child with special needs and you moved back to Ohio. Did you move back to Ohio because of that? Like, was there more of a support system there? Is that why, or like what? Because I noticed those were right after each other.
Well, if anybody's out there with a special needs child, and all of a sudden these things start to dawn on you, like if he has cognitive problems, which he does, genetically induced cognitive disability, he's not going to be able to support himself. And if the plane ever crashed with me in it and my wife in it, what happens to him? I wanted to move him back to his extended family so he could be raised around his brother, my siblings and all of their kids and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and
Yeah.
uncles. So he had a support system. That turns out to be a journey unto itself. And but we did that, and
Yeah.
then I got the call to say, hey, there's a merger that needs some help keeping it together. Um, I worked for Ladder and Bloom for 10 years, and Bob
Yep.
and
Know them well as well. Yeah.
yep, great man, great company. We did 19 acquisitions together, Bob and I, in that company. And then, I've been here for 5 years, and Dan and I think we did our 15th acquisition in 5 years.
God.
Uh,
Ladder and Bloom was acquired last year, correct?
yeah,
By
Ladder and Bloom was
Compass.
bought by Compass, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah.
gonna say you guys must have gotten together and like decided that hey, like we're doing acquisitions because like something's happened the last like year or two where I see you guys going everywhere and just being like, okay, another one, another one, another one, and that's only the ones that I hear about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was a conscious
And that's
decision, right?
so we grow by organic recruiting, which is an enormous effort. If net agent count growth is our goal, and I told you earlier, I said earlier, we don't care about being big. We don't. What we care about is making sure we have the right um, scale, the right velocity of revenue coming in. Even though it's a transaction fee company, if we have the right scale, then we can protect our mission. And our mission is to improve the financial trajectory. How do you do
Yeah.
that? Well, step number one is you flow 96% of all the commission revenue that comes in into our agents' bank accounts.
Yeah.
That's from first dollar. I mean, there's no capping. I mean, there's no
Oh wow.
kind of build up. And so our agents are paying a small transaction fee, and then it varies around the country. But this much or this much, it's small amounts to be part of the brokerage. And at the end of the day, and Mike Del Preti did a evaluation and published this a year and a half ago that we are at top of the stack in terms of how much gross commission income we flow to our agents.
Yeah.
And it's one thing. When I was with Ladder and Bloom, I used to say this all the time. I'd say, hey, our agents would walk in, and about one a week would walk in, talk to a manager, and say, hey, thanks for everything. I'd be nothing without you, but I'm leaving. Why? Because there's a much better financial package somewhere else for the agent. That's a problem. And if you listen to that, and I was president of that company for 10 years, it happened for the last 5 years I was there, it happened on average once a week.
Oh.
And so you start thinking, is there a better way?
Yeah.
And I was with Stefan Swanepoel down at one of his conferences in Miami. They were interviewing me on stage to ask what's better, this model or this model. Well, the reason that happened is seeing that hole in the bucket or that leak in the boat for Ladder and Bloom. And we're buying companies and we're trying to grow, and a steady stream of our top people are leaving. So during that process, I remember I was asked the question on a panel one time in New York City. Somebody said, what keeps you up at night? And I wasn't prepared for the question. What came out of my mouth was this. I said, what keeps me up at night is rule number 4 of the leadership rules of the horseman, which states when the horse you're riding dies, get off. And
Oh boy.
I know it
Oh boy.
sounds weird, and I said out loud, all the brands are there, and I said, but what I'm worried about is I'm riding a dead horse.
You said
And
that while you were still with the company?
yeah, I was still with the company. It's
Oh
nothing.
wow.
And I told him, I said, look, it's not the company. The company is brilliant. It's a
Yeah.
100-year-old market share leading company. The
Yeah.
problem is the business model. And when you see that kind of attrition, I mean, I'm sitting on stage because we've had tremendous growth in 18, 17 companies at that time. And, but it's a dog that
Not for nothing, Rick. That's a lot of. I'm not going to name any names, but there's a lot of companies like that. That story could apply to right now.
right now.
You
Yeah,
know,
guess
I mean,
what, dude?
I know. If not friends, I'm friendly with just about every executive in this industry. And like when you talk to them, some of them right now are kind of like questioning it all and going like, I don't know if I'm on the right boat right now. I don't know if I'm on the right horse. Like I don't know, you know. And it's
Well,
like, some are going to have to either change or they're going to ride that dead horse right into the water. Like,
yeah, well, that's what I say. Some of them are sailing into the sunset.
yeah,
But so the dead horse model was not a reflection on the quality of a company. It was or the people in it.
yeah,
Far from it. It
yeah.
was a reflection of the business model. And if you don't, one of our highest ranked values is to do things differently and be curious. And if you lose that curiosity for long enough, even if you're a top ranked company, like
Yeah.
some of the best I mean, Long and Foster, look at that company.
Yeah.
What an incredible company. But if they stay rooted in old model agent compensation plans, they're going to they're going to sail
So interesting.
that boat into the sunset, ride it into the dirt, whatever. But it's, you got to stay curious. And I think,
It's so funny because like literally for years, but I've been saying it to agents, but really it applies to companies, brands, brokerages, whatever. I've said for years that the quickest way to underperform on your potential is to get romantic about how you got here.
that's right.
And it's the idea that like, well, no, this has worked. My dad did it. This one did it. Like, here we go. This has worked forever. Look at us. We're number one market share. This works. This works. This works. And it's like the quickest way to underperform on your potential moving forward is to get romantic about how you got here.
Yeah.
Meaning, it applies to brokers and brands without a doubt. Like, what doesn't matter what got, that's awesome. What gets us there?
That was one of the books my mentor, my first broker made me read was Ray Kroc's Grinding It Out.
Yeah.
And he talked about always be green and growing, and that stuck. So, we talk about, I've been at this business for a long while. Um, and, people start talking about Hall of Fame and all those kinds of recognition moments. And I would tell you, I feel like I'm in the Pro Bowl still because, you know, we're still getting it done. And I mean, really
Yeah.
getting it done, not a little
That's what
bit.
I said, man. You're still in the trenches. That's what I said at the
I love
beginning of
it.
this. I'm like, you're still hustling. Like you're not getting propped up and just kind of like, give a wave and do. I mean, you're still hustling.
No, no, not only that. I mean, I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah, you
That's
say if
awesome.
you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life, and that's what I'm doing.
That's
So
awesome. I always hear that and I'm like, I love what I do. I still feel like I work really hard.
yeah, no, we
But
do. We work hard.
it's like you love different things. Like I love it when people come up to me and they're like, "You're so lucky. You get to travel so much. You get to whatever." And I'm like, "Oh my God,
Yeah, they
guys,
don't
this is
get it.
not travel. Like I'm going with my wife to Bermuda or something. Like, I'm about to do a European tour where I'm gonna get on a plane and just about when I look up and go, I can't take it anymore. How much longer is there? It's gonna be 8 more hours. And it's just like
Well, dude, when you're on the back of the boat with your wife,
yeah.
and that hits social media, there's a lot of people that say, "What am I doing wrong?"
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah,
right. And that goes back to like I love what you said before. You talked about how like there's discipline and there's, all this kind of stuff. I was literally telling an audience last week, I'm like, guys, don't be fooled. Everything you see of me online and everything else, it's 1%. It is
of
Instagram
course.
worthy. It is the reason why I get to do what I do is the other 99% that you never see that is absolutely boring. Like I am the most routine person you've ever seen, the most disciplined, routine. Like I had a message for our students at the beginning of the year, and I'm like, guys, how boring can you be in 2025? Like I know that doesn't sound great. It's not motivational. It's not whatever. But like literally, how routine, how boring can you be? Because that's what wins. All these people who are in all these Facebook groups and constantly responding to everything and constantly having an opinion. Sometimes I want to get in and go, do you ever sell a home? Like, are
Right.
you ever working? Like, are you ever like you seem to be available all the time?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's a it's a weird dynamic, but
I know we have to be careful about this, but there are leaders of companies or brands that spend their life available for, you know, travel conferences.
yeah.
And up until about 2.5 years ago, we just said, we don't want to go to those brag fests. Let's just do it. Um, let's just do it
We
and
all
see
know what you're
what
talking
people,
about. Yeah.
And then, you know,
So
I think
true.
look, what a crazy business. We get into a room and we share our success and we tell people how to do it. You
Yeah.
know, that's, we don't do the chest beating thing. Nobody in this company builds a monument to themselves.
Right.
This isn't about that. When I tell you we have a rare assemblage of talent, and everybody's got a contribution into the strategy.
Yeah.
And but we all know the lane we're responsible for
Yeah.
driving and
Yeah.
take a good bit of pride in making it happen.
Yeah.
You said the word discipline a few times. It came up earlier. Um, Discipline is kind of the price you pay to be disciplined, boring or otherwise, is small compared to the price you pay for failure when you look
That,
back at your life.
that's right.
So, man, it's an inexpensive way to go through life and you achieve your goals.
That's
My
exactly
daughter
right.
was a swimmer, and when she was having her meet, she'd get nervous and stop. I'd say, "Look, honey, just don't swim against the other people in the pool. Swim against your best time. You know what your best time is. Beat it today, and
Yeah.
eventually that'll be enough to get you on the podium." And sure enough, it was. Same thing with her volleyball career. Caroline did a great job with that, but it was always, how do you feel about your performance,
Yeah.
not everybody else's.
That's so
We
good.
don't
That's
we don't focus on the competition. We know they're out there. We're responsive to the marketplace, but it's all about waking up every day. I will talk to, before the sun sets today, I'll talk to two brokers. Um, and that happens to be today, but every week, I probably talk to 3 to 5 every week.
yeah.
But I don't go a week without talking to a broker who might want to join us.
Yeah.
No, so
Just consistently. That's so good. It was so funny. You answered the question before about like what keeps you up at night. I once, when you talk about like just competing about your against yourself and competing whatever, like, I'm a big believer that people they compare against people, but they don't only compare against people to say that they're not good enough. They also compare against people to stay in a place where they think they've done well because they're comparing against somebody who did less, but they did less with less. And
yeah,
so somebody asked me once at a conference, and they said
interesting.
we were doing a Q&A, and they said like, what are you afraid of? And I had to think about it, and I'm like, because I'm not really like a fearful person. I mean, I don't want to like have a bite off with a snake, but like I'm just not really a fearful person. And I said, my greatest fear is leaving this earth to a standing ovation to all of you, and then getting before God and having Him say, "What the hell?"
What'd you do?
And yeah, like, what do you mean? Like, you had so much more in you, you know? And it's that kind of idea. It's like, we're not, although it's easy to watch everybody else and it's easy to look at the obvious comparison and say, oh, I'm not doing as much. But there are people as well that look at people who are doing less and they use that comparison to keep them where they're at,
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
an interesting dynamic. We all run our own race.
Wow, I have no idea why this is coming up now, but I'm going to tell you something on that topic. Um, my son, his name is Walker. Walker was taking swimming lessons from a triathlete. Um, Wonderful guy. He'd spent a lot of time with kids, and he was teaching Walker how to swim. Not easily done with Walker, to understate it. So we became friends, and he contracted ALS. So he was in the later stages of that, and he was in a chair, and he could hardly move, but he could control a keyboard, I think, with a straw or his eyes at that point, and
Wow.
it was a soundboard, so he could talk. And he said, "How are you?" And I told him how he was. Probably took 6 minutes to do it, and and I was bragging about an acquisition that I had just done with my previous company, and then he thought for a minute. He didn't move. He didn't respond. I thought, well, I wonder if he got all that. And he then made his assisted equipment say to me, "Is that all you got?"
Wow.
Like, oh man,
Jeez. Yeah,
you
that'll
know.
that'll that'll get you. Yeah, that is
So yeah, at
jeez.
my home office, I have two things on the wall. The second thing he said, "Is that all you got?" And that was like mind blowing because I'm like,
Yeah.
"Hey man, I just did this
Yeah,
acquisition.
yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
killing it." He's like, "Is that all you got?" And then he said, "Be awesome."
Huh.
And this is a person who had very little time left on the planet and very little time.
Yeah.
It was so much work to get this message out. So I thought I better
It
memorialize that.
means something to you. Like someone else sees that and they're like, oh, whatever. You see it and you're like, no, it means something.
No, I get where he was coming from. Don't be too satisfied. What's your next goal?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible. Um, Are you down for some rapid fire? I want to ask you. I don't know what you
Yeah,
could say, what you can't say, but like if I ask you about some stuff going on in the industry right now,
sure.
can
Fire
you give
away.
us your thoughts?
Yeah.
All right. And like I said, if it's something you don't want to give your thoughts on, just be like, you know what? Whatever.
Yeah,
Uh
Jared, you know I have a responsibility to make sure
that's why I said it. Like you and
yeah,
I
so,
talk, and I know
but
I
I'm
know your
glad to talk
feelings on
about
some
it.
stuff, but you tell me when we do this whether you want to mention this, whether you don't want to mention this.
Yep.
Where do you stand in the industry, or what can you say about things like clear cooperation?
No comment. No, I'm just kidding. Look,
You can do no comment. That's fine.
no, I know I can.
Yeah.
I know. Listen, after Alan Dalton got caught in that meat grinder of Tom, what was it? Was it Tom Ferry interview, and then that got played in court. I'm very well aware that I can say no.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so clear cooperation. I heard a story once about it was a very short commentary about charity, and I've been past president of United Way and vice chairman of Police and Justice Foundation, and in New Orleans, and on the college board. There's all kinds of stuff that I've done. And charity was a big part of it. Let's help those who can't help themselves.
Right.
But when any organization steps in and says, we're going to take this from you and we're going to make you give that to, that's not charity anymore. That's forced contributions. And that deprives the giver of the feeling of
Yeah.
goodwill.
Right.
And guess what? It's a modern day Robin Hood. So hold that thought. That is fundamental to what I believe and what I'm about to say about things. So
Okay.
you asked me as a listing agent for all those years, I talked to every seller about my ability to cast a wide net in the search for a buyer for your home.
Yeah.
And I talked about all the ways we did that. And one of those was through inclusion in the MLS. I can get 6,000 other real estate agents knowledgeable and excited about selling your property. And if I can create that demand, then I can get you higher price, fewer problems, and a time frame that works out for you for your property. MLS was a big part of that, and it's a very efficient way to spend money.
Yeah.
Clear cooperation, go back to the Robin Hood, clear cooperation, and I believe that's the case in 95% of the cases. Now, if you get in New York City where privacy is a little bit
Right. There's going to be specific markets where you can
of
make an
course,
argument
this
that,
is a
yeah.
big deal. But but if you ask me, do I think a third party organization should mandate clear cooperation?
Yeah.
That everything else that happens after they're mandating it takes away
Yeah.
the free market environment
I
that
see what
we
you're
need to
saying.
be
Yeah.
in to make good decisions. Somebody says, well, that'll hurt the consumer. Well, not for long, because a company that hurts consumers is going out of business. That
Mm.
still doesn't give you the right to mandate to free enterprise how they should
I love it. So you're free market. Like you're like, hey, whether
market.
I
Let it
agree, disagree,
happen.
I'm for the free market. Let the free market do it, but stop telling us what we're doing. Like you're free market.
Yeah, and also, Jared, our agents are very smart people.
Yeah.
It's not up to us. And the Department of Justice will hand anybody their hat
Yeah.
and send them to the door if they violate this principle. And that's what's happening with NAR now.
Yeah.
Department of
Yeah.
Justice says stop interfering with that free market. So if I say to our agents, do the right thing and train them up appropriately,
Yeah.
95% of the time that listing is going as quickly as possible in the MLS. That
Right.
still doesn't give the MLS or NAR the right to mandate it.
Yeah. So
Sorry. And
interesting. Yeah.
anybody who says, like, oh, it's going to hurt the consumer. If you look behind what these arguments are
Yeah.
from people who are making them, what they're really doing is arguing for what will make their company more successful.
Yeah.
Or they're fearful about a market share dominant company depriving the market of inventory. I've been three plus decades, Jared. That is never going to happen.
Yeah. Meaning because the consumers are going to ask for what's in their best interest.
Absolutely.
And so is it kind of your opinion that if a seller doesn't want to, if a seller wants to have a pocket listing or whatever, that's up to that seller, that's fine. But you just don't think it should be mandated that like we're telling you how to do your business.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think, and for a couple of reasons. One, if the governing organization gets it wrong, you know what can happen. You can end up in lawsuits that are class action, that cost individual companies tens of millions or hundreds of millions, or the industry billions.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that just happened.
Hey guys, I want to talk to you about an amazing real estate tool right now called Mosaik. You know, if you want to take your people off of the portals where they're all hanging out and whatever and into your ecosystem, this is the tool that does that. You know, this is a beginning to end, not a CR, it's not another CRM, it doesn't replace that, but it's a beginning to end system that really looks at the lifetime value of your client and looks at every part of that process and takes care of all of it in a way that's completely transparent. So yes, they've got search, they've got transaction coordination, they've got, even for us when we do things like we teach our students the Core 100. They've got the ability to put those people in there, track what's happening, do all of that in an amazing way. But probably the thing that I love about this more than anything is the transparency. You know, in an industry that keeps talking about transparency, and usually when you hear something over and over again, it means that it's not being done at all. This is actually a transparent tool. This is the first tool that I've seen that actually brings the consumer into the transaction. And I think that is the next level of where we are going within this industry. You know, you hear from so many buyers and sellers that, oh, my agent didn't do anything, or I feel like they're not, and there's not this communication going on. This is the first tool I've seen, almost like the early days of Dot Loop where you had that collaboration, but it was just for the document and the signature. They can do that with the transaction now, not only with the clients, but with the vendors, whoever it is, in an amazing way where they can see every step of what's going on. You can write notes to them back and forth. They can see every part of the paperwork and everything and the way that you decide to show it. It's really the next level of what we need to be doing from a consumer experience perspective, so they know what's happening, and more importantly, we drive that lifetime value back to you. So if you haven't yet, guys, this is a tool you're going to hear over and over again. You're going to hear me talk about it because I really think it's my role to not just define what the problems or solutions are, but provide the tools that will actually get you there. And while so many tools right now are just check the box and just say you have them, this is one yourself, your team, your brokerage. If you're not on it yet, you need to be. This is not the last you're going to hear about this. They're going to grow astronomically, and this is something you need to get on board with if you're going to operate. If you're going to be one of those people that really overcomes and is that top producer in your area, you've got to have the right tools in place, and Mosaik is one of those right now. So do yourself a favor. Go check out mosaik.io, mosaik.io. Again, mosaik.io. You won't regret it, guys. Send us questions if you do, but this is one of those ones that you're going to look back on and remember, amazing tool. Yeah, I mean, let's I'm not even going to ask you. I'm not even going to ask you about the whole settlement and everything because I think you guys were a part of one of those companies that was over 2 billion in revenue or volume. Volume. I mean that's a whole other
it's
thing.
Public. It's public. We contributed 3.7 million plus attorneys' fees for months and months and months. They're in the hundreds of thousands.
For the crime of doing business the way that you were supposed to be doing business. Like that whole thing drives me insane. But
hey, can I give you another parallel?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the movie A Few Good Men?
Yeah, of course.
Remember the end?
You can't handle the truth. Yeah.
You can't handle the truth. By the way, that was an ad-libbed. They let him just riff in the scene, and he did it with like amazing.
Crazy, right?
Crazy. He's that good. But at the end, when the verdict comes back for the two gentlemen,
the two soldiers, the officers.
The two. Well, they weren't officers, but when the verdict comes back and it's not guilty, and then they get expelled, dishonorably discharged. One of them says, "I don't understand it. What did we do wrong?"
Right. I remember that.
And the speech that follows that is what we did wrong as an industry. We were supposed to not let a trade organization make those decisions unchallenged.
Interesting.
We needed to challenge those decisions. So as an industry, we can say we didn't do it, and we didn't. There's not one person that I can ever find that colluded to fix prices.
Yeah, that's a joke. I mean, most of our agents don't even like each other. Now they're colluding.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be hyper competitive collusion.
Yeah.
But
I literally put out a video yesterday or today, I think, where I kind of was from an event, but I was joking about this, where like the Josh Sitzer guy basically files this because, he went to list his home and he had no choice. He couldn't negotiate. He didn't have 12,000 other agents in his area. He didn't have the ability to negotiate. He couldn't have listed for sale by owner. He couldn't. And then he paid the price of a record home price, this victim, and then he goes and starts because he said that things should be negotiable when they were.
Right.
Once it's all done and the settlement comes down, he goes and starts a flat fee real estate company And like my only question to him is, so are those negotiable? Wasn't that the whole point?
Right.
Like it makes no sense, but
Yeah.
nothing said welcome to 2024 more than that
Right. And
nonsense.
antitrust suits are wins very seldom wins for the
That's a
what
great example, by the way, though. The soldier there who goes,
right.
but wait a second, what did I do? I followed whatever. Like that's a great
And
example.
he said we were supposed to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
And in this case, we were supposed to never let a trade organization dictate to us the business practices of our agents in the field. I will tell you, I will turn this decision over to the agents about inclusion, exclusion
Yeah.
all day long because I know they want what's best for the customers and they'll get it. And 95% of the time, that's going to be making sure it gets into the MLS at the earliest possible moment.
Like you said, free market. Like
Yeah, where
I'm
do you come
I'm
down?
always a free market guy, by the way. Like
Okay.
I think that's business 101. I think that we've become a world where that's gotten very dirty now. Like you're not sure what's what, but it's just like no free market. Not with you tell no free market. Like that's. All right. Again, you don't have to answer this one. Last one I'm going to ask you about before I move on to something else here. You have any thoughts on the three-way system? Local, state, national. Do you think it should be forced, or do you think
Well,
that, or do you want to leave that one alone?
I don't want to leave it alone. You can tell by my earlier comments. I think, you know, if I have an organization that if I have an organization that costs membership dues, then every member ought to know the value they get for it.
Right.
And it's kind of this cool acid test. You go, hey, if you didn't have to pay, would you? Well, that question is in the process of being answered.
Yeah.
I got a call from one of our brokers. I'll keep it really high level. And he said, Rick, are you going to mandate that we do this? And it was a franchise broker. And so
Yeah.
no, I said, no, we're not going to mandate anything relating to that. But their board was recently going to choice. You could be a realtor, you could not be a realtor. And but you still get access to the MLS. And so I said, but tell me what do you think your agents are going to do? He said, well, it's interesting you asked because I surveyed them and 82% of them will not pay dues to the organization because they don't see a benefit. Now,
Interesting.
what that means is that someone's asleep at the switch selling value,
Yeah.
selling the real value proposition for affiliation. And there is
Right.
tremendous value. But if the people who are being asked to write the checks are not are not aware of that value, then the organization is going to perish,
Yeah.
or
Interesting.
it's going to be severely um, shrunk. And I think
Diminished.
that's what
Diminished.
we're in the process of doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Potentially diminished. It's going to be interesting to me because you do see these kind of stats and polls as far as like, if people have choice, will they stick with it? I'm always wondering, like, will there be a bit of a bounce back, meaning that there's a lot of anger right now in the industry, and people who are upset and people who are, so time will tell. I didn't love it when NAR released a statement last month and said how they hadn't lost any members and membership remained the same. And I'm over here going, renewals are in January. Like
Yeah,
what kind of a thing is that? That to me, and I said this to a lot of the leadership at NAR. I'm like, that's the kind of crap that has to stop because that's not real. Like you're still
uh,
trying to play everybody. Like just be honest. Be,
right.
whatever. Like we'll really know in the coming year whether that's the case or not. But in the meantime, the focus needs to be on how do we bring enough value that it makes sense and how do we because I get this label of like I'm anti NAR. I'm not anti NAR. We criticize the ones we love and we want to do better. I criticize my children because I want my children to be good adults. And so when you criticize an organization, it's not because you're trying to be the reason for their downfall. It's because we want you to be as good as possible for the sake and the health of the industry. And that's a different way of looking at it. But
Yeah, and where we are now, though, is we're in a position for decades. The organization has had some pretty tight controls via the gateway MLS process.
right.
Now we're just scratching the surface of this topic right now, but in order to understand where we are now, I think you have to even go back a little further. But the um, the idea that there may be some lack of openness about membership comes out of fear. And there is reason to be fearful, but not a productive reason. What they need to do is become, if they want to be relevant in the future, they have to be very good at reinventing their value proposition and making sure that everybody feels it.
Right.
There's something that a leadership axiom that I talk to our managers about, and it goes something like this. Our value proposition is only as good as our ability to first make our agents understand and aware of the things we do for them. And second, get them to use it to the point where they feel the tangible benefit.
Yeah.
Failing those two things, agents aren't going to want to be with us.
Yeah.
So
communicate it and experience it.
Experience it to the point of tangibility.
Yeah.
And until that happens, there's going to be, and especially now with all of the changes that have been wrought, I think there's going to be an outflow of people wanting to be a part of this organization called Realtor.
Yeah.
They do some fabulous work.
Yeah, it's a good point. You got to be able to communicate it, and then they've got to be able to experience it. And then that becomes tangible and real. Whereas if they don't know about it, it doesn't matter. If they don't feel it, it doesn't matter. And if you have one without the other, if you communicate it, but then they don't feel it, it doesn't, you need both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good stuff. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. In the meantime, with all the external noise, there's a guy named Adolf Levitt that opened up a donut store in called the Mayflower Donut Company in the middle of the Depression. I talked to our agents about this, not in the middle, in the worst year of the Depression. He ended up being the largest donut company in the world. He spun off, he got creative, made donut making machines, dry product mixes for the first time. Mayflower Donut Company, and there's a wonderful story there, but why did they end up to be that successful selling donuts that cost less than a nickel in the Depression? Because of what their motto was, and it was printed on every box and every storefront. Some people in the audience might have parents that remember it. I don't, but here was the motto. It became known as the Optimist Creed. The motto is, as you travel through life, brother, whatever be your goal, keep your eye upon the donut and not upon the hole. So that's my advice to our agents. If the market's off 20%, 30%, 40%, that leaves 60, 70, or 80%, doesn't it? The question isn't whether or not the business has enough, the housing market has enough business for you to have your best year ever. The question is, what are you doing to have that market find you?
Right.
Navigate. Don't be a victim. Be a navigator. Wake up every day with the discipline and make sure that you're talking to enough people every day that you can find the other 80%, 70% of the business that's there.
Yeah.
And Jared, I know I know that you don't like plugs and all that, but that's why we're thrilled to have you again at our national conference. You leave people lifted up and with a plan of action that they can go out and win business irrespective of the condition of the marketplace.
That's right. I appreciate that. It's actually a good little transition there. So I am doing your guys' conference. I believe I'm coming to you guys straight from, speaking to that original conversation we had. I think I'm coming to you guys from like Turkey or Portugal or something.
Oh, wow.
So I will get my rest on the flight and get on over. It's in Arlington, right?
It's in Arlington, Texas.
Arlington. You want to give the dates and just kind of like give the link for anybody within the company who's thinking of coming, because this is definitely one they're going to want to go to. It's one of those things. I think sometimes when things shift and things become more difficult for people, they start to pull back on things. And there's some things that you should pull back on, right? There's a difference between cost and investment. And yet this is the time right now when you go in on that development, that self-development, that business development. This is when you pull ahead from others by actually becoming the pro that we were all supposed to be the last 10 years, you want to give us a little bit of details about it?
Yeah. Well, again, going back to my beginnings, my broker made sure I went to Alan Jacobson, Mike Ferry, not Brian Ferry. He was the lead singer of Roxy Music. Mike Ferry.
Probably went to that too. You got to have fun too.
Yeah, no, we did some of that. It was a work hard, play hard environment.
There you go.
But it was always invest, even when the money was thin and tight. find a way to do it. And sometimes he even supplemented the 19-year-old that didn't have the money to do it.
That's
So
awesome.
we have to make sure to reinvest. What we're coming together in Arlington, Texas at Lowe's Live, the Lowe's right outside Jerry Jones Stadium
Yeah.
on March 19th through the 21st. We're coming together with key drivers of fun, camaraderie, R&R, and a whole lot of education about how to navigate the market that we're in.
Yeah.
People, little things like 35-year rolling average, the interest rate today, as high as it is still below the 35-year rolling average. It's not
Yeah.
up. And
Yeah.
by the way, stop talking about inflation. Somebody posted something up while I was on the airplane this morning that said about, complaining about inflation. And they posted something that said eggs, $9.95, and they were free range chickens or hens, whoever lays eggs.
Yeah.
And they're complaining about inflation and blaming a certain administration for inflation. Well, what this picture, if you zoom in on the picture, it's $9.95 at Sam's Club for 5 dozen eggs. That's $2.50 for free range chicken eggs. That the price was lower than that. That's lower than the price before COVID. And they're complaining about. So be a student, get in, and that's what we're doing in Arlington. We're bringing in world-class speakers, and for real estate and non-real estate learning.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
good.
important to balance that. And if any
That's
of
so
our
good.
agents listen to this, they go and register. Go to Bullseye, click the link, register, and come on down. It's a great experience.
Yeah. I love what you just said too, real estate and non-real estate. Like I get accused sometimes, especially on the podcast. My wife and I will usually do these and we end up talking about everything. Like
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? I was talking to a guy last night and he was talking about relationships and how this one didn't work. And, I'm always fixing these people and I'm like, relationships are multiplication, not addition. If you're coming in and completing somebody, it doesn't work. It's not half plus half.
Right.
One
Right.
times one, right? And you talk about these types of things, and it's like, this is my whole thing. Like, you'll hear me there talking about how you get a listing, how you get this, how you get whatever. But if at the end of the day, you're not full, none of it matters.
No.
If you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not, none of your strategy, none of this stuff matters. And so I love the fact that you talk about that. It's an overall full picture. Talk about the business, talk about the things that lead up to the business, talk about the things that matter, talk about the parts of our life that our business actually, fulfills and takes care of and, all that stuff. But what were you going to say? It looked like you wanted to say something there.
No, you touched on something else. When we think about the mission of our company, the trajectory, improving the financial trajectory of our brokers and agents' careers and lives, that's a 360-degree look. We could easily carve out equity positions. We could easily do stocks. Think about the companies. If you invested $10,000 over the last 3 years in a certain company's stock, it'd be worth about $1,700 today. That's not net worth growth. That's a recipe for recruiting and retention that doesn't fuel real net worth development. So we bought everybody a financial literacy platform. Everybody's on the Dave Ramsey Smart Dollar program.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Track their income and expenses and their progress towards net worth development. We have health insurance for our agents. We have incredible services at the higher end with creative planning.
Love
So,
it.
it's a holistic approach to doing it. And
Love it.
at conference, that's where they find out all about those kinds of things. They're reinforced, and all of our new iterations and enhancements of all of the products, tools, and services that we offer to our agents and brokers become, they're in the spotlight, and we help people really. I told you I went through the Stephen Covey stuff and the Gestalt stuff, and one of the things you have to do before you get the privilege of intervening in somebody else's organization is you have to know the lens through which you look at the world. If you don't know that, then you're leading people in organizations and helping to make bad decisions or decisions based on your lens. So
Yeah.
my personal missioning work, which it takes a lot to really get it right. When you get to the elevator portion of that speech, you're on the third floor, doors open in the lobby. How do you tell somebody who you are? Personally, mine is leave them better than I found them.
Yeah.
As a result of anybody's exposure to me inside my company or otherwise, they'll be more inspired to do their job or more able to do their job. bing,
Yeah.
the door's open. That's who I am. That's what drives everything I do. And that's what we as an organization. I mean, you talk about people like Dan Duffy. The industry doesn't have a Dan Duffy except for
Yeah.
Dan Duffy,
Yeah.
and we got him.
Love
So
him. Yeah. Love him.
Dave Dickey, our chief technology officer, these people are really, really fine-tuned and good at their job, at their role. They understand things.
Yeah.
So that's what all comes together on March 19th and the 21st.
Yeah, it doesn't honestly, man, when I listen to you talk, it doesn't surprise me that we've collaborated and worked together for all these years because we share common beliefs about so many things. Like even as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, my older son just turned 18.
Yeah.
And when you talk about financial literacy and all these kinds of things that matter so much to agents, to people, to kids, I've had my kids on my credit card since they were about 14 years old, so that when they turned 18, they'd have 800 credit scores. I signed them up for custodial accounts years ago where they learned how to trade stocks and what matters. And the best thing that ever happened to them was when they made dumb decisions and bought things they shouldn't have and lost the money. And that was
Yeah.
like great money to lose to learn that lesson. My son and I, right before we got on this call, we're talking, and I'm telling him about, you've got the opportunity right now as an 18-year-old to get an FHA loan with 3.5% down. You can have closing costs conceded. You can rent out 3 of the units. It's up to a 4-unit building. You can do this with. You can live in one of them and make the money and like now start to build equity and do. And we're having these conversations, but these are the things when I hear about you guys saying we've got them in a Ramsey program doing this, and these are just people things. Like this is what should happen when people come in contact with us. They should hear more than, as I said, dream big and then dream bigger. Like they should actually learn the building blocks that allow them to come from a position of strength around these things that we've been told our whole lives you don't talk about. You don't talk money. You don't talk whatever. And I'm like, screw that. We need to
Yeah.
talk about it. Like you need to understand this stuff because when we start talking about investing in yourself in a down market and how much self-development matters and the difference between spending and investment and how you start to look at what the ROI of an investment is and how you can't do that if we haven't put you in a position to understand this stuff and not be afraid of it.
Yeah.
So I love that, man. When I hear you say that, I'm like, we're in alignment. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you feel like we should be talking about? Is there any final message you want to get to everybody?
No, for any agent anywhere, empower yourself with the knowledge that you can navigate any market. It doesn't matter whether you're a United real estate agent or anybody else. If you're out there worrying and wondering about your future, my guiding principle or axiom is action cures anxiety.
Yes.
That's when I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, that one, I have to take a breath. Action cures my anxiety. And that's how I live my life. And that's what navigate the industry. Action cures anxiety. Go sick them. Get
Do you
them.
know, do you know what's crazy, man? So literally last year I was doing a whole thing on this, the difference between hope and anxiety, and they actually did a study and they found that they come from the exact same place in the brain, but they can't at the same time. And
Uh,
literally, the thing that creates anxiety or hope is literally the difference between action and inaction, like no action, right? So when you're in a place of no action and you sit there and worry, you create anxiety, you start wondering what's going to happen, you start wondering, you have no hope. Hope literally comes from action.
yeah,
And again, same part of the brain, can't happen at the same. It's like light and darkness. You don't flip a switch and there's a battle. The light comes on. It's
yeah.
not, is it going to be darkness? Is it going to be light? Like which one works? It's the same thing. And so I love to hear you say that, man. It's so true. How can people get in touch as far as like following what you guys are doing at the company, or like is there any
Um,
place you want to send them to? Or
yeah, you know what? Do this. I don't have links or any of that stuff to put
yeah,
up here.
you don't have to. That's
But I'll tell you the easiest way to get a hold of me is rick@unitedrealestate.com or go to growwithunited.com.
yep.
But send me a note. If you're out there and we've crossed paths in the past, I'd love to talk to you. Whether there's a business purpose of it or not, don't rick@unitedrealestate.com is the best way to get me.
Awesome, man. Well, you are, I think while we're doing this, you're a credit to our industry. I appreciate the connection and all the stuff we've done and will continue to do. I love the hustle, man. And I look forward to seeing you in March,
Yeah.
right after I get a little bit of rest when I get in there. And then
Yeah. Hey,
hopefully I'm coming in with a
turkey,
tan.
drink the coffee,
Yep.
not all the way up though.
Not all the way up.
Oh,
Okay.
and then eat the Iberico ham
The Iberico
in
ham.
Spain.
Okay. All right.
Eat the ham, drink the coffee.
All
Enjoy
right. Good to know.
to the
Good to know.
fullest.
That'll be our closing notes right there. So, all right, my man. Guys, if you enjoyed this, leave a comment. Make sure you're subscribed, and if you get a chance, make sure you say thank you to Rick for being on here. So, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, Jared. Love you, man. See you soon.